quite an interesting week to be visiting the United States.
It's very interesting.
And Silicon Valley, I'm sure. So what kind of people did you meet? What kind of companies did you meet with?
Sure thing. So we've had a program this week where we met with a bunch of different types of people. So investors, entrepreneurs, mentors, universities, given that we're from the University of Melbourne in Melbourne ourselves as well. And the real objective of the trip was to connect our entrepreneurs with people who could help them build their businesses.
Now, you have talked about why so many Australian startups are moving to the United States and why that's not actually a bad thing. What do you mean?
Well, there are two cities in the world that are synonymous with an industry, and that is Los Angeles and San Francisco for entertainment and technology and entrepreneurship. And I think that when an Australian goes to LA to try and break into Hollywood, we applaud them and say that's fantastic and go and have a crack. But when you go to previously, when entrepreneurs are coming over to Silicon Valley, we lamented the fact that they were leaving. But for us, I think we've moved on from that. And what we need is, Australia's a small market. We have 24 million people in Australia. You have 320 million people here. And so for us, if they are going to build a global business, they need to have global networks. So it's important that entrepreneurs from Australia are moving overseas, are forging networks and making relationships. And those things are beneficial for other Australians who are friends with them back home.
So do you think it's important for those companies to ultimately move back?
I think, the Australian in me, the patriot in me says I would like there to be a presence in Australia so that we can benefit from that as well. And, Melbourne is ranked as the most livable city in the world. So a lot of entrepreneurs who come over here do move back eventually for family reasons. But at the same time, there are plenty of people who've made a career and a life over in the US, but I think that's just part of the world we live in these days.
So what are some things you've learned on your trip, some things that may have surprised you?
I've been to Silicon Valley quite a few times, but I think it's been a really interesting week to be here given the election last week. But I think one thing that I was surprised by is the resilience of Silicon Valley and the fact that they are just going to get on and do things, which was, we didn't quite know how it was going to go this week, but that was for me the takeaway.
As somebody who lives in Australia from the outside looking in, what's your take? We've been talking a lot about what a Trump election means, a Trump presidency means for Silicon Valley, means for technology. What's your view as somebody who lives outside the United States? Well,
firstly, it's been very interesting to watch the election, I must admit. But I think for Australians, especially Australian entrepreneurs, a lot of them use the E3 visa to come and move to Silicon Valley. A number of our friends have come to do that. So I think the concerns around immigration are valid for Australians in particular. So I know that President-elect has kind of softened a little bit in his stance on those things, but hopefully that won't have too much of an impact for Australians.
Have you been talking to people who feel like they're in limbo?
Not yet, because I think they're all fairly pragmatic and they're biding their time. There's still a lot of time until he becomes president, and so I think it's a bit of a wait-and-see holding pattern at the moment.
What are the biggest challenges that you think Australian entrepreneurs face that you would like to change?
I think the first one is, Australians have a fairly self-deprecating and laid-back attitude. And so when you have an Australian pitching a business, they kind of say, oh yeah, I'm working on this idea and it's a pretty good idea and I think it's going to be quite good. And it could be the best company in the world, but they're not culturally going to go out and say that. Whereas in America...
channel the Travis Kalanick.
Exactly
I am
right.
awesome.
Correct. I think, to be honest, Americans are a lot better at marketing than Australians, and so I'd like to see Australians having more confidence when they come over here because they can match it over here.